Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the Future of Dining Out webinar hosted by WindsorEats. We know the question on a lot of restaurant owners' minds is when all is said and done, what will the restaurant industry look like post-COVID-19 in Ontario? And while no one really knows the exact answer to that, unfortunately, what we'll be doing today is discuss what the immediate future may look like based on how other jurisdictions are opening up and the restrictions that they've put in place. So let's get started. Now, I do see a lot of familiar faces in the participant list. I know there are also some folks from outside the region who are watching this, so I'll go into a little brief introduction as to what WindsorEats is first and who we are. What we are, we consider ourselves a for-profit destination marketing organization with a focus on culinary tourism or culinary, and we're really here to amplify the message of local culinary businesses. But we're more than that. We're a multi-headed beast. We're also a tour company showcasing the region and actually bringing bottoms into seats of the culinary businesses we're showcasing. And we also are a festival and event organizer, driving thousands of visits to the area and people out of their homes. Now, who am I? I'm Adriano Ciotoli, founder and co-owner of WindsorEats. And the other owner, co-owner of WindsorEats is Pina, who sometimes seems that she's always in the background, and she's kind of that today. She is here as part of the webinar, and she's a big part of WindsorEats, and she'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A for any of your questions. Now, to do some housekeeping before we go along, questions can be asked using the Q&A button on your screen. Just click it and type your questions to pass it along. And the webinar is being recorded and it'll be made available for those who registered. Also, a survey will be emailed to you afterwards, after the webinar. Please let us know how we did and what you thought of the webinar and what information that you were able to pull from it and found valuable. Now, what should we be expecting from this webinar? As I mentioned about the information that we're going to try to dissect from what other jurisdictions are doing, I do want to be known that this webinar is not going to be the 10 Commandments or the Bible of reopening. The province is very likely several weeks away from considering opening dining in restaurants. From what we've been hearing, cases need to go down in consecutive days for a couple of weeks for them to consider stage 2, which restaurants will be part of the reopening. And Premier Ford has actually been on record a couple days ago stating there is absolutely no timeline to consider implementing stage 2 of reopening. So that'll give you a little bit of an idea. What we're doing is we're going to be providing data and information coupled with cases of reopenings and their guidelines and restrictions to help drive inspiration and thought for restaurants who want to begin their planning process into preparations and potentially be ahead of the game and have ideas stashed away for when the guidelines are eventually released in Ontario that they can hit the ground running. Also, please keep in mind, things are very fluid and things are changing by the day, and you'll get a glimpse of that a little bit into the presentation. This is about narrowing the scope of the unknown and providing that glimpse into what the new reality for restaurants may soon be and for the foreseeable future. I also want to warn there's a lot of information in this webinar that will be thrown your way. So I hope you've had your morning coffee with or without a little something in it. I won't judge, and that you're ready to take notes if that's how you roll. So we'll be focusing on a couple things in this webinar. One are the guidelines and roadmaps, as I mentioned, released in other jurisdictions that have opened, but also you may have seen that we have conducted our own survey where we received over 500 responses to give an indication as to how customers feel about dining out once restaurants reopen. We've taken a look, as I mentioned, at several places, some shown here, which have or are in the process of reopening restaurants and have released guidelines and restrictions as to how those restaurants will have to operate. We've also broken down those guidelines and restrictions for you into three main categories to make better sense of what those rules restaurants and those locations are facing, and give you an indication as to what those restrictions or what restrictions are possible once the province of Ontario determines restaurants will be reopening. And so those three are health and safety, food preparation and service, and infrastructure and logistics. As we dig into things, first, let's look at the troubling side and get it out of the way. We'll begin with what could be happening to the industry and can technically be a possibility based on government's decisions in other areas. Now, for anyone who has been to Ireland, this is the world famous Temple Bar in Dublin, Ireland. I'm sure you know, Irish pub culture is well known across the globe and is part of the identity of Ireland's hospitality and tourism industry. Now, Ireland has a population of about 5 million people, and in comparison to Canada, using cases per 1 million residents, Ireland has almost 2.5 times the amount of cases of COVID and 2 times the amount of deaths. So as a result, the reason I'm showing this photo of Temple Bar, of the pub, is as a result, the government of Ireland is actually taking very strict measures and has announced pubs across the country will actually remain closed until August 10th, the earliest. So it gives you an indication that while some places are opening up, others are still determining that we're a long ways away from allowing the public to gather in places in the hospitality industry. And this is kind of one of the worst case scenarios, I guess, that you can say from what the hospitality industry could be facing. Now, another example to take caution from and a little closer to home is from our own country and in the province of Alberta. Alberta originally declared that restaurants will be reopening May 14th, and an entire set of criteria was created, of which we'll get into shortly. Now, with the date set, May 14th, many restaurants spent well over $10,000 bringing in staff and completely sanitizing their restaurants in the week leading up to reopening, as well as restocking their fridges and bars. Then, less than 24 hours to reopening, they were caught off guard by the government announcement that certain businesses, including restaurants, cafes, and pubs, will no longer be allowed to open on May 14th, and that was pushed back until May 25th, the earliest. The announcement even singled out the city of Calgary as a community that continues to see this disproportionate number of COVID cases. So it gives you a little bit of understanding as to the reasoning why they did that. And as you can imagine, restaurant owners were furious, and they are now demanding that the Alberta government reimburse them for their out-of-pocket costs, especially with a lot of the food that will now go to waste, and then having to bring staff in again to sanitize the restaurants again once they get closer to the new reopening date. So that's just to show you that when an announcement is made that restaurants can open in Ontario, it doesn't mean you have to. I would actually recommend waiting, if you can, until the reopening date actually passes to be certain that what happened in Alberta and to the Alberta restaurants doesn't happen to you. I wanted to get those two examples out of the way to show the reality of the struggles, but also the fluidity of the situation, that things can change pretty quickly. So now let's dive into those three main categories that I talked about. The first, health and safety, and this one I'm going to go through fairly quickly, mainly because we know that the health unit is going to be handling this. and they will have their restrictions in place. So let's kind of skim through here. One of the main ones that we've seen almost across the board was expanding and establishing cleaning procedures. That's pretty much everywhere that has released guidelines, and that includes conducting more frequent kitchen cleaning, conducting more frequent front of house cleaning, cleaning all the surfaces that customers contact, and it's recommended to do that in some places and mandatory in other to do it after each use. Thoroughly sanitize each table after each customer leaves, and that even includes tables and chairs as part of the process. That has been made mandatory in places like Alberta, and BC is recommending that as well. And then, of course, staff should be performing hand hygiene very frequently. That's regularly washing your hands and using sanitizer. The next step is for employee health and personal protective equipment requirements. We know some places are saying that just front of house, and there's pretty much a requirement across the board as far as personal protective equipment goes and protecting staff. But it seemed to be varying everywhere. Some are saying that just front of house staff dealing with customers are required to wear face masks and gloves, while others are stating all staff, including back of house, are required to. We know that Michigan is requiring restaurants to implement employee health screening as well for each shift, and to define protocols for symptomatic employees. So they're kind of throwing that into the lap of restaurant owners and managers to have to deal with. They're also asking to establish several hand washing stations and ensure that they're properly supplied, and ensure that proper hand washing procedures are stated, as well as provide an increased access to hand sanitizer. Italy, which we all know in Europe was pretty much took the brunt of the virus. Italy has taken it one step further and is even requiring face masks on customers who are entering the restaurant until they're seated, while the customer is in line at the cash register, and even while the restaurant is heading to and inside the restroom. So they've really implemented it on a much more strict scale to ensure that that people are being safe. The next is washroom sanitation and supervision. And I know from talking to a lot of restaurant owners recently, this has been something that they've been talking about in how they're going to deal with. We'll talk about Alberta and BC right off the bat. Those are ones that are more likely something that Ontario may try to mimic, or the guidelines that they've implemented or are proposing. The washroom capacity must allow for social distancing between guests, and that's 1 meter or 6 feet. So examples that they've given is if the washrooms are too small, monitoring to make sure that even just one person at a time is using it, but also to consider if it's large enough that you can still keep social distancing in the washrooms, to consider closing alternate urinals in the men's washroom. Washroom sanitation and supervision is being asked to be enhanced and done at a very high frequency. They haven't gone too much into detail as to what that is supposed to actually be. There's a little bit of gray area there. They're not mentioning, or it hasn't been mentioned, if that is after every use, or to even have someone standing in front, much like some bars and pubs have bouncers, making sure that the capacity is and the distancing is actually being adhered to. But those are a couple of the things that have been implemented and recommended as far as washrooms in restaurants and the hospitality industry have been put forth. So now for the next category, kind of went through the health and safety side. a little quickly there, just because we know the health unit will, as I mentioned, be taking charge of that. The food preparation and service is going to be a really tough one. And they've actually, this one is kind of varied really in every single region. Alberta and BC have taken similar approaches. Those are ones, again, that I feel we should be mimicking. One of the ones that they've actually recommended is, while it's not enforcing, they're strongly recommending to adjust your menu. And what does that mean? They're recommending to right size your menu. Can you reduce the amount of menu items to accommodate reduced kitchen capacity with the back of house staff having to stay 6 feet apart? What products will allow you to still be profitable? What menu items do not require tableside condiments? Because we'll get into that in a little bit in another one of the sections. Which menu items are takeout friendly if guests still prefer to do carryout? So they're strongly recommending, and the restaurant associations are strongly recommending that you actually take a look at your menu and adjust it as needed to make sure that you are maximizing your sales and maximizing your profit margin as well, and the ease of being able to make the products while still being able to socially distance in the kitchen. Now, they're also saying that update the methods that your menu can be accessed by customers. So some of the recommendations they're asking, are you going to shift to digital menus on tablets that are easier to wipe down? Are you going to provide menus to customers that they have to access directly through their own personal phones? Most places do have restrictions on menus, that reusable menus or paper menus must be used once only and then tossed. However, reusable menus and digital devices for menus must be thoroughly disinfected after each use. And digital devices, or personal digital devices, are actually being encouraged more so as the best option. And in an encouraging sign in the survey that I mentioned, which again we'll dig into a little deeper later, showed that 41% of respondents would actually prefer ordering from a menu on their own personal device once they start heading out to restaurants again, while 29% or 29.5% each said the disposable or one-use menus and the regular restaurant menus would be their preferred way of looking at the menus. So the shift there from the customer is at least in the favor of, if you want to avoid having to print menus or the work involved with wiping it down after each use, that providing it on a person's own digital device that they can download is actually where customers are starting to go to, where they prefer to see the menu. Now, one rule that we saw that was fairly interesting was in Michigan, where they are mandating and requiring that all delivery or meals that are being delivered must be completely sealed to ensure that they aren't compromised while being delivered. And we know that this could cause some issues with restaurants. So far from what we've seen in the many recommendations and guidelines that have been implemented, Michigan is the only one that is requiring this, but it's just something to keep on your mind for if we move forward in that direction, how you would react to that and how to deal with that and adjust to it. Another big thing, and this is across the board, salad bars and buffets are no longer allowed. That is everywhere. And to even build on that, no preset tables. Restaurants are now being told in most places, including Alberta and BC, that restaurants must use pre-rolled silverware as well. You have to remove table condiments and other frequently touched items. For example, salt and pepper shakers, ketchup, hot sauce, all those must be removed from the tables. Also, items must be removed from self-service drink and condiment racks, utensil and tableware stations, and those have to all be provided to the patrons once they're ordered or asked for. It is recommended that in place of the condiment racks, that you provide hand sanitizer at each table as well for when guests arrive to the newly sanitized table that has to be done for each customer. Now, Alberta has implemented table service only, and what that means is that all dining must be at the table only. Also, that means not at the bar. Also, guests dining inside the restaurant must order food and drinks from their table. And from all indications, this means no service or seating at the bar itself. We put out some questions trying to get some clarification. We haven't received anything back yet, but we can easily update everyone once we do receive some answers. Also, when it comes to reservations, while most jurisdictions are strongly encouraging restaurants to enforce reservations in advance, Italy has actually mandated it to prevent crowds at restaurants. Michigan is also asking restaurants to have guests wait in their cars or away from the establishment while they're waiting to be seated. And several areas are asking restaurants to consider options for dining customers to order ahead of time to limit the amount of time that they actually spend in the restaurant itself. This one we've seen only in writing in Prince Edward Island, is that they're requiring restaurants to ensure that only residents of Prince Edward Island are dining in restaurants. So far, we believe that's an isolated requirement. We haven't seen it anywhere else aside from PEI, and we think that it's a result of the size of the island, its isolation, and its low case numbers. And while other areas, of course, travel is really frowned upon at the moment, PEI has actually put it in writing just to ensure that restaurants can only serve residents of PEI. Now, they're also asking that takeout is separated from dine-in. Alberta is requiring and BC recommending that takeout areas have clearly, very clearly demarcated floors with physical distancing markers in areas where lineups may occur for people doing takeout and waiting for their takeout, as well as keep lineups away from dining areas. And so that's a little extra that they're putting into place or mandating that restaurants do for takeout once dine-in actually opens up. Now we're going to move into infrastructure and logistics. One of the first things, obviously, and this is almost across the board, is that 6 feet is required for all guests within the dining establishment at all times. And as I mentioned, it seems pretty standard across the board, including Michigan, Alberta, BC, Italy, PEI. This is what they are requiring. The only exception we've been able to find that doesn't mention 6 feet being required is the state of Georgia, which we'll get into in just a moment. So that means restaurants must now space all seating areas to maintain the social distancing guidelines. And it's, while many restaurants are being told that they have up to 50% capacity of what their normal capacity is, this guideline of the 6 feet being required will probably be a better indication as to what your capacity may be. Just because we know some restaurants, smaller restaurants, while you may be able to fit half the capacity in there, you might not be able to do it while maintaining physical distancing. They're also asking that aisles should be wide enough to allow room for people to maintain physical distancing, and that's servers that are serving the tables, people walking to the bathrooms, or entering or exiting the restaurants. In BC, British Columbia, movable tables shall be arranged in such that the distance from the back of one chair to the back of another chair shall be more than 1 meter apart. So they went specific as to how far the actual backs of chairs should be. When it comes to fixed seating, for fixed tables and chairs, operators will seat or restaurant owners will seat every other table. And for booths, restaurants have the option of the booths being divided through the use of temporary partitions that raise the division between booths to at least 2 meters or 6 feet tall. So that gives you, they went a little more into detail as to how the actual distance of the chairs themselves should be distanced. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to capacity, it looks standard across the board that 50% of your normal capacity is what's being required in pretty much every area. And remember when I said Georgia was the exception, they are they are requiring no more than 10 patrons per 500 square feet allowed inside the restaurant at once. In Italy, again, because they were so hard hit, they got a little more strict on some businesses, and any establishment that is smaller than 25 square meters will only be able to allow one customer at a time inside. So that is really, going to affect how businesses that size are able to operate. Again, that is almost on a worst case scenario based on what happened in Italy. I don't anticipate that being a requirement here in Ontario, but again, if that 6-foot requirement is asked to be put in place, that may be what some restaurants have to do for ones that are very small. Now, there also has been some discussion about party sizes. It seems most rules in most jurisdictions are limiting party sizes to no more than 6 people per large table. It hasn't been indicated, and we haven't received a response from Alberta if the 6 people per table still have to be the 6 feet apart, if they're not from the same household, or if they're just friends going out to eat. To adhere to the rule for social distancing required of all guests, but they are saying that restaurants can do parties of 6, but no more than 6. Now, mark it up. Unfortunately, this doesn't make reference to your prices to increase profit margins. It is about marking up spacing in lobbies, hostess stands, restrooms, and other consumer gathering areas. Those are the ones that Michigan has mandated. They're asking to provide physical guides, such as tape on floors or sidewalks, to ensure that customers remain at least 6 feet apart in lines. This is even to encourage to provide specific paths to restrooms and routes for servers to clearly identify the proper and safest path for customers and staff to go to keep distance from tables and from other customers. Alberta and BC are also encouraging, not mandating, but strongly encouraging that the routes you create are actually one-way traffic to help maintain social or physical distancing. Now, there was a brief mention about some tables for physical barriers. In most places, it is pretty much either mandatory or recommended to install physical barriers such as sneeze guards and partitions at cash registers, bars, host stands, and other areas where maintaining physical distance of 6 feet is difficult. And physical barriers should be installed where tables cannot be adequately separated. For example, the heightened barriers between adjoined booths that we spoke about in the BC recommendations. And again, BC is recommending that if there isn't a distance of at least 1 meter or 3 feet between bar staff and the guest, that a physical barrier must be installed between the guest and the bar or kitchen. Otherwise, bar seating must be closed. And so those are some of the requirements that British Columbia is putting into place to ensure the safety of staff and the guests. Also, amusement, and I'm sure none of us are getting amusement out of hearing all of this right now, but Alberta, BC, and PEI, so all Canadian provinces have indicated that we've seen that have released guidelines and restrictions, have indicated that facilities are only open for dining, delivery, and takeout only. That means any amusement or recreational activities within bars, cafes, or pubs are not allowed at this time and for the foreseeable future until more stages are introduced and restrictions eased. This means no dancing on dance floors, no VLT play, no billiards or pool tables, no karaoke, no hookah and water pipes, or any other activities such as that. It is solely, they are reopening the dining rooms solely for the activity of eating and dining in and takeout, and that is it. So let's say Ontario announces restaurants can reopen and provides a list of restrictions that can be must be adhered to. You follow them, you open your doors, but will there actually be customers? WindsorEats, as I mentioned, we recently did a survey over 4 days from May 10th to May 14th, 2020. We received over 530 responses, which provides a great sample and better accuracy for the results. The vast majority, 98% of the responses were local to Windsor, Essex. So this is definitely going to give you a glimpse into what your customers are feeling about the eventual reopening of restaurants. So let's start with the obvious question. When asked, what are your thoughts on dining out once restaurants reopen? Just over, fraction over 75% responded that they are still willing to dine out at restaurants once restrictions are lifted. And while 25% said that they definitely would not be dining out, it is still good to see that the number is on the higher end versus what it could be based off of some of the fears that people are having. Because with over 58% indicating that while they'll go out and dine, they are nervous about it. It is absolutely key that all precautions are being taken by restaurants to show that the health and safety are at the forefront of every action within the restaurant. For the first while, it really will be all about helping ease the concerns and making the customers feel more comfortable about dining out. Or if something were to happen, if a case were to pop up, not even necessarily at your restaurant, but as a result of dining out, that 25% number of people who definitely wouldn't be dining out, and that 58% that are indicating they're nervous will shift over to that definitely not dining out. Now, we dug a little deeper and asked those 75% how often they would continue to dine out in relation to their pre-COVID-19 dining habits. Over 36.5% of the respondents stated that while they continue dining out, they won't be dining out as often. And the main reason for that was because of those health and safety fears, which underscores, again, the need to absolutely nail your sanitation and health and safety measures, even in a very visible way for customers to see and begin feeling safe, knowing that you're taking all the precautions possible. Now on the next slide, I'm sure it's going to hurt your brains a bit because I know it absolutely made my eyes cross. We asked a set of 2 questions that were very similar, but with a bit of a different lean. They were, what potential guidelines and restrictions for restaurants may encourage you to enjoy a dining experience and persuade you to dine out more? And the second question was, what potential guidelines and restrictions for restaurants may hamper you from enjoying a dining experience and prevent you from wanting to dine out? Each chart, as you can see, is clearly represented by the appropriate emoji for the questions. And as you can see fairly clearly, customers will definitely feel more confident dining out with the restaurants following the safety protocols. That part may make your head spin because it's those actions that will help you recoup restaurants and generate profit are what will hamper them from enjoying the experience. Because this includes mandatory dinner reservations, where 30% said that that would hamper them from enjoying or even prevent them from dining out, as well as time durations for being at the table or in the restaurant, where 48% said that would prevent them from dining out. Because we know that with the reduced dining capacity, table turnover is going to be even more important than it already is. And so to put time restrictions on tables and mandatory reservations, unfortunately, the customer looks to be leaning towards wanting to shy away from that. But the biggest deterrent by far was that even in wanting all the safety measures in place and understanding the cost to implement them, 62% of the respondents said prices that were higher than pre-COVID-19 would deter them from dining out once restaurants reopened. In my opinion, this means, both Pina and my opinion, this means that the recommendations from jurisdictions to adjust your menus, to simplify them, and absolutely perfect your profit margins on dishes will be integral to riding this out until restaurants can open fully. Now, you may notice as well that outdoor dining was pretty high on the reasons that would encourage potential customers to dine out and dine out more often. When asked, once restaurants reopen, in what setting would you prefer to enjoy, or in what setting would you like to enjoy your food? Over 75% indicated that they would enjoy dining outdoors. This was even more than the 67% who said that they would enjoy dining indoors with the restaurants at reduced capacity and social distancing physical distancing between the tables. So it seems that customers really are leaning towards being outside, and more information is actually coming out from the medical side that says it may actually be safer to be dining outside because the ventilation is much better as well. So why is that a good thing to know that people are wanting to dine outside? Because it's the easiest and at the moment best way to tackle the reduced capacity issue. And many places have actually already begun tackling it. Lithuania's capital has actually opened their public squares to restaurants to do dining. Plazas, squares, streets, nearby cafes and restaurants will be allowed to set up outdoor tables free of charge in the capital, thus be able to conduct their activities during quarantine. The city has allowed 18 of the city's public spaces, including its central cathedral square, its main square, that they have been opened up for outdoor cafes and restaurants, and more are expected to be added as the summer progresses. And that move has actually been very welcomed by the restaurant owners, with already more than 160 restaurants and cafes applying to take up the offer. Another one that we have seen, while we heard about the negative of what happened in Alberta, The City of Calgary and their administration has developed a new process to support local establishments for approvals of temporary patios on public lands, as well as additional measures to process those applications for those residing on private property. That means temporary permission will be issued at no cost for temporary patios. Existing patios on public lands will not be charged for 2020 in Calgary, and patios could be extended into the public parking and community spaces to better accommodate businesses with reduced space. So restaurants, cafes, pubs, and bars must still operate, though, at no more than 50% seating capacity, and that includes outdoor patio seating, which must be at 50% capacity as to what the current formula is for determining that. Now here locally, Philip Rocca of Mezzo Restaurant and Lounge, and I saw him make a mention in the or a comment in the chat. So hopefully you enjoyed this photo, which was recently in the media. But the popular dining destination that is Windsor's Little Italy is asking the City of Windsor to close down the entire street every Friday and Saturday while restrictions are in place for dining. This would allow restaurants and shops to extend into the roadways, creating a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, as well as ensuring physical distancing and help restaurants and businesses expand their capacity to increase revenue to help them get through this time. Also, we at WindsorEats have submitted a proposal to develop, coordinate, and execute outdoor food halls and an outdoor food hall project to allow multiple small local restaurants the opportunity to expand into outdoor dining space within city parks under the coordination of WindsorEats. The use of outdoor spaces benefits small local restaurants, as we mentioned, that have limited capacity prior to COVID, as well as those without outdoor dining facilities and patios. Now, the project has the capacity, obviously, to help spur economic activity within the hospitality industry, and the use of the spaces requested by WindsorEats would allow the city to provide continued support to the hospitality industry, which has been absolutely crippled by the pandemic. We feel that this is a great solution or a perfect complement to the Via Italia proposal, and even something along the lines of the Calgary concept for patios on sidewalks and parking spots, as not all restaurants have the ability to open up onto sidewalks and roadways that are directly adjacent to their property. So our outdoor food hall proposal gives those restaurants the opportunity to expand into a location such as Lansbury Park, which is what we asked for our trial, which is a covered outdoor space, and provides a great opportunity for social distancing and meeting the health and safety regulations. Now, we understand this is a very difficult time and that some of the potential restrictions and data that I have presented may not have been rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, but they do paint a picture and they do show some light and opportunities cracking through behind all of the scary stuff. More than ever, it's important to be creative and to diversify into different revenue streams. Digital offerings such as classes or cooking kits being delivered have seen great success locally and globally by restaurants. Many experts have stated that now is not the time to park some of those crazy ideas that we know some of you may have had. There has never been a better time to implement them and test the waters as customers themselves are adapting to new habits. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that you're able and we're able to take away some information that will be able to help you formulate a plan for what your reopening may look like once the province decides to move forward. If you have any questions, again, nothing has come through in the Q&A. Hopefully that's a good sign that we were answering some of the questions as to what may be anticipated for a reopening in Ontario. And hopefully that gives you a step forward to be able to make cost-effective decisions without worrying what exactly is going to happen, and have a great unknown. So without any other questions, you will receive a survey soon after this webinar, and please respond to it. Let us know your thoughts about it, and even as far as what other information you would like seen and what other webinars you would like to hear to help you out. So take care, be safe, and hopefully everyone is still remaining a little bit sane during isolation. Take care, everyone.